Welcome to episode 34 of the Pitchside Podcast Season 2. I'm your host HRD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes and all the content on the channel. Follow us on social media and listen on Spotify, Google Podcast or any other platform. Join us for more and you are welcome. We kick things off from the Carabao Cup Final in England. Of course, it was Chelsea playing Liverpool at Wembley Stadium, of course. It was one of the greatest, I would say, 0-0s that I ever saw in my life. Chelsea and Liverpool played a terrific game of football. Both sides missing big chances. It was end-to-end stuff. It was very open. How did that game ended 0-0? I don't know. There was like 4 or 5 goals, disallowed by VAR. I mean, VAR had some serious decisions to make in this one. Naby Keita had a suspicion, not a suspicion really, but it was a red card that wasn't given, to be fair, after a pretty brutal tackle on Trevor Chalobah. But overall, I think that will go to the backside of the game because, realistically speaking, this was all about missing chances from both sides. Mendy having a terrific game from Chelsea's part. Cameron Kelleher as well had a couple of good saves. Some of the chances Chelsea were missing were absolutely ridiculous. Pulisic missing head-to-head. Havertz as well. Timo Werner, Mason Mount, Christian Pulisic. I mean, in particular, Christian Pulisic missed a big one in the first half. Mason Mount hit the post in the second. There was some brilliant back-and-forth action. There was a big ebb and flow to this game. It was fluctuating. There was no real, proper team control in the game. You can't say that Liverpool controlled the game or Chelsea controlled the game. It was end-to-end stuff. Every team that has the ball just would straight go forward at the other team and would attack them. And it was decided by penalties, of course. There where the big twist came, I think, because Kepa was introduced instead of Mendy before the end of extra time to take on the coming task of penalty spots, and he ended up costing Chelsea the loss, not just missing his own penalty to give Liverpool the victory, but also not saving any penalty, and not even diving, I think, to most of them. He conceded all 11 that Liverpool played, and with some brilliant penalties taken as well. Speaking of that, really, there was some brilliant penalties taken by both sides. In the end, Liverpool, congratulations, of course, a big title that will motivate them to stay on the course with Manchester City for the title, and for Chelsea, of course, it is, maybe a loss that would serve as a wake-up call for the rest of the season, because maybe, this will put them in a declining path as far as the top 4 battle is concerned in the Premier League. But again, it was a great final, and it was an entertaining watch overall. Still in England, and turning our attention to the Premier League now, and I think the focus here is going to be on both Manchester sides since Chelsea, Liverpool and brought in the Carabao Cup, and most London side, Arsenal didn't play and Chelsea didn't play, as well as Liverpool. So we have to talk about the Manchester sides to start. The round started, of course, on Friday with Southampton defeating Norwich City 2-0 on Saturday afternoon. It was Tottenham defeating Leeds United 4-0. We talked about it in the preview. It was Tottenham's perfect opportunity to strike back and to retaliate after the loss against Burnley, and they did so against Leeds United, the worst defence in the Premier League by a country mile now. 64 goals now conceded from Marcelo Bielsa, who of course was sacked. And apparently, according to reports, it's Jesse Marsch, former Leipzig man, is going to be in charge of the club. Arsenal and Liverpool didn't play, as we mentioned. In Brentford, the return of Christian Eriksen it was against Newcastle United. It wasn't a triumphant return, really, as Newcastle beat them 2-0. The goals coming in from Joe Linton and Joe Willock. Crystal Palace drawn against Burnley 1-1, and at the Old Trafford, that's where we start our proper sort of focus on this one. Manchester United drawn against Watford 0-0, and this was another disappointing game for Manchester United. I mean, somehow, against Watford of all teams, a side that is pretty hapless at 19th spot, they're not even missing games in hand to say that they have a chance of recuperating or recovering some ground and escaping the danger zone. They're not. They're 19th with 19 points. And yet they still got a goalless draw out of Man United. That means a clean sheet for Watford against Manchester United. Just to put this into big perspective, Watford kept only 1 clean sheet or 2 clean sheets in the last 8 Premier League games. They conceded 4 against Crystal Palace. They conceded twice against Brighton. They lost 3 to Norwich, to fellow relegation battle in Norwich, and they lost 4 to Leicester City in the FA Cup. And recently they drew as well against Newcastle. So they don't exactly know what a clean sheet mean exactly, but Manchester United made it look good for them. Again, not efficient. Anthony Elanga was by far the best player on the pitch, the most creative of them all. And when Manchester United lack creativity, when Bruno Fernandes is not creating well enough for the club, I don't think creation comes from anyone else. Paul Pogba is still performing well. Recently, maybe that's a positive, I don't know, but at the current situation for Manchester United, it's not exactly great positive thing to talk about. They're 2 points now behind or ahead of West Ham at 4th spot, who defeated, of course, Wolverhampton on Sunday. We'll get to that in a moment. I mean, it's a rough situation for Manchester United, and amidst all the reports and all the situation around the club and Ralf Rangnick, who seems almost certain by each passing week that he won't get the job. It will not be a permanent thing like Solskjaer. It will be basically caretaker, and they will definitely look for someone better for next season. Mauricio Pochettino is there. Zinedine Zidane candidates. Eric Ten Hag is probably the likeliest, as well as Pochettino. But definitely United are in a dire need of a new coach that would jolt some adrenaline into that squad, because it really looks like a dead squad every time it's play, and at home it seems worse because of the pressure of the fans as well on them. In Brighton Hove Albion inclined 2-0 against Steven Gerrard's Aston Villa. Of course, the 2 goals coming in from Ollie Watkins, before that Matty Cash. Of course, big victory for Aston Villa. They really go away from the relegation zone. They really evade the danger for the moment, and it's definitely a great victory again for Steven Gerrard after a couple of not so good results as of late as far as Aston Villa. A couple of losses against Watford and Newcastle United, which are surprising, really, particularly the one against Watford is really surprising last week. But definitely they bounced back really well here. 2-0 for them against Brighton, a good side overall in the season as well. But the big problems and the big talking point was in Everton, in the Goodison Park, as Everton hosted Manchester City. And straight off the bat, I'm going to talk about something here. I'm going to talk about the VAR decision, about the penalty or the non-penalty, the non-handball on Rodri. In the game against in Chelsea's game against Liverpool in the Carabao Cup, Romelu Lukaku had a goal disallowed because the forearm, his forearm basically, was in an offside position. If by that judgment we cannot say that Rodri's handball is not a penalty, or is a penalty, that is really weird from VAR, and nobody explained us how VAR works in this situation. Now, obviously, laws cannot include every possible case where the ball is going to touch a player's hand, but apparently, according to the laws, it's the sleeve or the line of the sleeve. So apparently, Rodri got touching it by the line of the sleeve. I generally think that it is a penalty, because half of the ball was like touching his proper hand, proper arm. I really genuinely feel that Everton were robbed of a penalty there, and it wasn't like there is a player pressing him or something, or trying to take the ball off him, or putting him in a situation where the ball hits him in the arm, for example, or forced to use his arm for some reason, even unintentionally. It is not. Rodri was free, the ball was coming down, and he chose to put his hand up there. Like, even by token of the innocence, or token by intention, this is a penalty. This should be a penalty. Obviously, couple that with the decision of VAR and in the final of the Carabao Cup, it still continues as another exhibit, I think. An exhibit, I don't know how many, of how VAR is not used well in the Premier League and in English football overall. It's genuinely, some serious reconsiderations should be done, I think, by the Premier League and by the English FA in how VAR is used, and particularly in how the referees react to the decisions of VAR and to the input of VAR. Probably the biggest idea that comes to mind is that referees should look more into the monitors. They should go and check the monitors for the cases and take a look for themselves and make decisions for themselves, instead of waiting for the people in Stokely Park to make that decision for them, because it doesn't really work like that, and the referees are really, taking the brunt of the blame, because the FA came up with an explanation or an announcement afterwards saying that it was a penalty, basically. So that was the big point. Like we can't even talk about the game because the game had not a lot of things to talk about. City were the better side. Like before that incident and after that incident, City were the better side. Everton couldn't hang on a lot. But I don't think that City needed something like this to win a game of football or to try and get the 3 points that they need anyway. But again, this is going to be the biggest point. A goal from Phil Foden, capitalising on a horrendous defensive mistake from Everton, who were really good defensively for the whole game. But it was one moment that was costly. But again, Everton, I don't think they will care about this. They will certainly deflect the situation and move to talk about the penalty that was not given to them. On Sunday, of course, one game was played. It was West Ham United defeating Wolverhampton. A tough win for West Ham United, but again, one that will help them in their cause to stay in the top 4 fight in the Premier League. They're 2 points behind Man United at 5th, of course. 2 games are still to play. Arsenal are set to play Liverpool on the 16th of March, and Chelsea-Leicester is yet to be determined. It will be played, of course, later down the line. The standings for the Premier League at the moment: City with 66 points, Liverpool of course with a game in hand now, 60, 50 for Chelsea with 2 in hand, 47 for Man United, 45 for West Ham, 45 for Arsenal with 3 games in hand, 42 with Tottenham with 2 games in hand, 1 game in hand for Wolverhampton with 40, 1 as well for Southampton with 35, 33 for Brighton, same situation, 30 for Crystal Palace. They played all their games to Aston Villa with 2 games in hand with 30 points, Leicester with 4 games in hand, 27, 25 for Newcastle at 14th with 2 games in hand, 27, 24 for Brentford with all their games played, 23 for the worst defence in the league, Leeds United at 16th, Everton with 22 points with 3 games in hand, 3 games in hand as well for Burnley at 21, 26 games played for Watford and 19 points, 1 game in hand as well for Norwich with 70 points at the very bottom. Instead of going to Spain, I'm going to go to Italy now and go to Serie A, and it is one of the most interesting title races I think I have seen in a while. This is, I think, a deflating title race. Of course, we're going to talk about the 3 games for the top tier of the table, or the 3 games at the top sides of the table, as a whole package, because they're intrinsically linked to each other, and ended with the same overall result, which is a draw. Both games for Milan sides on Friday were played because they have of course a Coppa Italia semi-final to look forward to on Tuesday, as Milan drawn against Udinese 1-1, Genoa against Inter 0-0, and Napoli defeated Lazio 2-1. Of course, late at the death, they win their game, of course, to take the points, take the full points, from Roma, and to go top of the table, of course. A late win for Napoli, this one was, thanks to Fabian Ruiz in the 90th minute. Obviously, it was almost another week of dropping points for Napoli, of course, but they never missed this one. They go top of the table, and I think after a bit of a tough spell, as of late, 3 draws back-to-back, including, of course, a draw against Barcelona in the Europa League, then getting eliminated from that competition, losing 4-2 at home. It definitely was a big victory against a side that is interested in the battle for the top 4 as well. They're still within a shout of being 4th, although they're 7 points off Juventus. And we're speaking of Juventus, we're going to get to them, but obviously we're going to get to the table, top 3 of the table for the moment. This was a brilliant game, by the way, from Lazio and Napoli as well. It was a pretty interesting one. Lazio were the better side for most of the game. Napoli in the second half, they upped up the ante. Lorenzo Insigne coming in with the goal and the assist, of course, in this one. Pedro with the 88th minute equaliser that we all thought, I think, was the end of it as far as Napoli and Lazio were concerned. But the second goal coming in from Fabian Ruiz, who scored the winner for Napoli, taking them top of the table, 57 points, sharing the same number of points with Milan, who drawn against Udinese, and after a draw against Salernitana, where they were saved by the bell, basically, as Inter Milan lost to Sassuolo, and Napoli drawn as well, as we mentioned in the last round. Napoli drawn against Cagliari. It was not to be again, as of course Napoli, was mentioned, defeated Lazio and gone top of the table. Milan At the very least, they're not third now at the table, because Inter Milan, on the other hand, again, another goalless result for them, another game where they don't score, and another game where they don't seem very, very effective despite dominating the full game. Something needs to change, I think, as far as Inter are concerned. This is the third game in a row where they don't score, and that includes 2 games at home against Liverpool in the Champions League, where they could have scored at least a goal, and against Sassuolo in the Serie A, where they dominated the game as well and missed so many opportunities and could be really on their way to, and they could have been really on their way to victory as far as they're concerned. The cat and mouse game continues in the Serie A, and definitely now nobody seems to know who's favourites. And the fact is that if these 3, and particularly I think the Milan sides, keep on this bad form, they're given a big chance and big opportunity to someone to come from the back and really put in a penny for competing for the title. I mean, Juventus 7 points, speaking of them, of course. Salernitana, first of all, defeated Bologna, that's on Saturday, or drawn against Bologna 1. And on Saturday, Juventus grabbed a 3-2 victory against Empoli. Dusan Vlahovic was wonderful yet again in this one, proving his worth to the club, scoring 2 goals in the game and upping his tally now to 5 goals already for Juventus, for Dusan Vlahovic. He's absolutely terrific, and he's the kind of a striker that would be world class pretty quickly, and is absolutely the sky's the limit, and the only way for him is up, obviously. Great win for Juventus again, although with no clean sheets, but after a draw in the Champions League, they will take it, and also they will take this because that keeps them 6 points now off Atalanta, who still have a couple of games to play. They play on Monday against Sampdoria, and play, of course, they still have a game in hand from previous rounds. Sassuolo defeated Fiorentina 2-1. Cagliari defeated Torino away from home 2-1. Hellas Verona defeated Venezia 3-1. Roma went up tough winners and hard-earned winners against Spezia away from home. In the 93rd minute, they're getting a penalty, converted by Tammy Abraham. It was absolutely brilliant victory as far as Jose Mourinho is concerned, who obviously was not on the pitch because he was suspended. As we mentioned before, Lazio lost to Napoli at the death 2-1, of course, to keep the cat and mouse going in the musical chairs game, to be more honest, for the Serie A table continuing. As you mentioned, Atalanta is still to play against Sampdoria. If they win that, they still have a game in hand and still within a shout of course, staying in that top 4 conversation. The top of the table and the standings in the Serie A are like this: Napoli with 57 points, as well as Milan 26 or 55 points for Inter, 26 games played. Juventus with 50 points, 44 for Atalanta, 44 for Roma, 43 for Lazio, 42 for Fiorentina. Verona with 40 at 9th, 36 for Sassuolo, 33 for Torino, 32 for Bologna. Empoli 31 points, Sampdoria 26, as well as Udinese and Spezia, 25 for Cagliari, 22 for Venezia, Genoa 17, and Salernitana 15 at the very bottom. To Spain now, on round 26 of La Liga, of course, and again continuing for another week, Barcelona are the big winners from the week, of course. They defeated Athletic Bilbao 4-0, but we're going to get to that in a moment. On Friday, it was Levante defeating Elche 3-0. On Saturday, Valencia kicked things off by defeating Mallorca 1-0. Getafe drawn 2-2 against Deportivo Alaves. And then, of course, back-to-back, it was the Madrid sides playing Real Madrid. Earned a tough victory against Rayo Vallecano. I mean, this was the kind of game that, I think translates the good and the bad about Real Madrid. When they are under pressure or they make some mistakes, they don't sound that good. By the way, for a big bit of a trivia, who's the goalkeeper for Rayo Vallecano was? It was Lucas Zidane. It was the son of Zinedine Zidane on the other dugout for Rayo Vallecano. I mean, it was probably a brilliant feeling because he's one of the players that were, nurtured by the Fabrica, the academy for Real Madrid. It was a hard-earned victory for Real Madrid, coming in, of course, by guess who? Karim Benzema, the best player for Real Madrid for the last 2 or 3 years. easily, without a doubt, been the best player. Scores the winner for Real Madrid, and still keeps the gap for 6 points between them and Sevilla after 26 games. The other side of Atletico defeated Celta Vigo 2-0 and continue on putting on some positive momentum. And this is surprising, really. And I'm not saying surprising because it's Atletico, but it's surprising seeing their form this season. This is the second clean sheet in a row that they keep, which is a really, bonkers thing to think about, because they haven't kept a clean sheet on God knows how. This is the third game in a row, or the second game in a row in La Liga where they keep a clean sheet. Of course, 3 good results back to back. I would say maybe the Manchester United one was pretty disappointing because they were the better side in that game. I think against Celta Vigo they played, I think, a good game. This wasn't the classic Atletico Madrid game. They attacked really well. They put in great balls for Renan Lodi, who's absolutely turning into somehow a Roberto Carlos at the moment, as far as Atletico is concerned. I mean, he was always decent, but it's just that he's improving this season. It's quite underrated, to be fair. He's one of the few players that are shining bright for Atletico Madrid. I mean, alongside Joao Felix as well. I mean, cannot really discredit the guy. Joao Felix is really improving this season, albeit still not that close to the level that he should be for someone who's bought for 126 million euros and for someone who's so much talent with so much potential to be the next leader and one of the next leaders of the Portuguese generation, the current Portuguese crop of talent that is rising up for the next decade or so after the fall of the generation of Cristiano Ronaldo and Pepe and what have you. But it's again a great victory for Atletico Madrid, keeps them in the fight for the top 4 spot, obviously right behind Barcelona, same amount of points with them. Of course, Barcelona have a game in hand, so that might be a big advantage for them, and doesn't really help. On Sunday, Villarreal smashed Espanyol 5-1. Yeremy Pino was the man of the hour in this one. He received a 10 out of 10 rating by SofaScore. Expectedly, the guy scored 4 goals in the game from 7. From 4 shots on target, he scored all of them, which is an efficiency rate. I mean, I don't think that I've seen it anyway. 4 shots on target, 4 goals for him, and 5, of course, for Villarreal overall. That's a great victory for them, coming after a draw that was a bit disappointing in the Champions League, and they're also still within a shout of playing some Champions League football. 4 points off Betis at 3rd, so this means that the 3rd place position is still up for grabs now. And with Barcelona being the form that they're in, Atletico Madrid rejuvenating themselves, this is going to be a great battle to watch as well with Villarreal. Another side, as we mentioned, involved is Betis, who lost the Sevilla derby against Sevilla 2-1. This was, as you would expect, a tight, very intense, very passionate, very, great atmosphere in the derby, of course, as it is for the big derbies. Rakitic made it 1-0 from penalty spot. Manil Haddadi made it 2 for Sevilla before half-time. For Sergio Canales made it 2-1 to halve the deficit with a brilliant free kick that went past Yassine Bounou, of course, who delivered another assist and becomes the second goalkeeper in La Liga to have the second highest number of assists from a goalkeeper in La Liga history, which is a brilliant stat to have for the Moroccan goalkeeper, one of the most underrated, I would say, goalkeepers in the world. I mean, he's not as good as someone like Mendy or Donnarumma or Neuer, but he's absolutely getting to that level anyway. Real Sociedad, of course, another side that is involved in the top 4 battle, defeated Osasuna 1-0. It was a tough victory for Real Sociedad's side. It was won by the only goal for Aritz Elizondo in the 52nd minute. And of course, in the Camp Nou, it was Barcelona, as you mentioned, the biggest winners, I would say, from the week, defeating Bilbao 4-0, and that last 15 minutes or 20 minutes of the game where Barcelona turned on the heat and they were absolutely electric. Ousmane Dembele looked as good as ever. Luke de Jong scoring, Memphis Depay scoring. It seems that Barcelona for this game, at the very least, had no problems whatsoever. Atletico Bilbao didn't do anything significant to try and put them off and put Barcelona off by any measure. They couldn't really muster anything, and Barcelona completely dominate them in this game. It was brilliant from end to end. This was almost classic Barcelona, really. 72% possession, lots of shots, lots of passes, 787 passes. This was peak Barcelona. This was 2009. proper Guardiola Barcelona stuff that we were witnessing there. It was a brilliant win, again, brilliant performances, and this kind of performances might convince Dembele actually to stay at the club and to build a new project around him. Maybe Barcelona would go for a permanent deal for Adama Traore. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is finding second life with Barcelona. Ferran Torres is probably the only signing that hasn't really worked so far. The guy is still not good in finishing as you would expect him to be for a €35 million signing. But again, this problem might be eradicated, in the next few weeks or so. Obviously, as the season continues, and Barcelona gain more momentum now, particularly in the Europa League, which is a trophy that they could seriously be favourites now to win with this recent rejuvenation and form, and this recent performances with the likes of the youngsters as well in the midfield, the likes of Pedri, of course, and Gavi, and Pedri in particular was terrific. I mean, some of the touches he was making and some of the skills he was displaying were absolutely wonderful. Barcelona, at the moment, deserve all the praise in the world for turning things around and winning basically the transfer window in the fall. It was absolutely brilliant performance again. Xavi deserves all the credit for taking this side and improving it with the signings that they made and absolutely giving the best possible Barca version at the moment. One game is still to play in La Liga, of course. It's Granada playing Cadiz on Monday, of course, and as you mentioned, for Barcelona, again, the biggest winners, I think, for me, for the week overall, and the best performance of the week certainly goes for them. Rounding off the episode, and we go to the Bundesliga. It is round 24 of the German top flight football, and not a lot of significant things happened really this week. Nothing really special about the week. Bayern won against Frankfurt 1-0. It was a tough win for Bayern Munich, of course, defeating Eintracht Frankfurt by the sole goal, but again, dominating the whole game. Joshua Kimmich has an absolutely terrific performance with an assist, of course, to Leroy Sané. No Müller on the side, obviously, because of COVID, but definitely Bayern Munich looked pretty decent, close to something of a normal lineup or normal way of playing in the midfield. With Joshua Kimmich and Marcel Sabitzer being pretty central, and playing arguably, I would say, his best game in a Bayern shirt so far. He still has ways to go, obviously, but the guy is improving, definitely is the kind of player that, maybe will take a while for him to grow with the side, but once he gets the peak of his performances, I think he will be a really good player, coming good for Bayern Munich. Speaking of Bayern Munich, of course, as I mentioned, a victory for them, but Dortmund didn't even make it easy for themselves. They didn't try and keep the chase on Bayern Munich for 6 points. They dropped 2 more to make it 8 now behind them as they drawn against Augsburg on Sunday afternoon. No Haaland, no efficiency up front, it seems, despite the fact that they defeated Gladbach 6-0. But again, after the loss against Rangers, after the elimination against Rangers in the Europa League, it seems that they returned to their usual mediocrity, let's say. Torgan Hazard scored the goal for Dortmund that thought to be a winner until the 78th minute when Noah Bazi equalised for Augsburg. Of course, Augsburg, a very rough and rugged side sometimes. They really can hold you down pretty big time. They did that to Bayern. They defeated Bayern early on in the season, of course, 2-1, and now they hold Dortmund back 1-0. Of course, they hold them from keeping the gap only at 6 points. Again, Dortmund, they cannot blame Bayern, really. Nobody can blame Bayern in this case when Dortmund are not really doing good on the table anyway. Leverkusen, of course, elsewhere, the third team of the table, they kept displaying the great football, and after a loss against Mainz last week, they turned things around. They bounced back terrifically against Arminia Bielefeld. No surprises, really. 3-0. It was Lucas Alario, Moussa Diaby on a brace as well. It was a wonderful game for Bayern Leverkusen. They get 3 points and they keep on playing and keep on firming their spot at third with 44 points. Leipzig at fourth, of course, drawn against VfL Bochum, defeated VfL Bochum 1-0, aside that, defeated Bayern 4-2. They managed really to hold Leipzig out for a long time before Christopher Nkunku found space, and once that guy found space, he's in great form with Leipzig throughout the season, really, both in the Bundesliga and in the Champions League as well. So their great form is absolutely brilliant, and they definitely, he's definitely their best player of the season as well. He scores the only goal for Leipzig to get them now at 4th spot, and to think that Leipzig in December were like 11th or even 12th on the table at certain points, and now they find themselves 4th with 4 points behind Leverkusen and could be 3rd by the end of the season. It's quite the turnaround, and all the credits to Domenico Tedesco for taking that side and turning things around. Freiburg, of course, defeated Hertha Berlin on Saturday 3-0 to keep close for the 4th spot, 40 points for them as well. Hoffenheim defeated Stuttgart on Friday night to kick things off in round 24 in the Bundesliga with 2-1 and stay 40 points as well. Join with Freiburg and RB Leipzig. It's going to be a very tight battle for those top 4 spots. Union Berlin returned to victory ways finally, defeating a side that has really been doing well this season under Bo Svensson in FCF Mainz. 3-0 it was for Union Berlin. The second half belonged to the home side after scoring early in the first half. The second half belonged to them, scoring twice thanks to Geraldo Becker and a brilliant third goal from Tao Awoniyi. Of course, the sole goal from Mainz came in late from Delano Buzog at the very last minute of the game. Köln drawn against Greuther Fürth 1-1. This was a very disappointing draw because Köln were leading at this game and Greuther Fürth equalised in the 69th minute thanks to Sebastian Griesbeck. Elsewhere, of course, Borussia Mönchengladbach, the last result we have on the day. Mönchengladbach drawn against Wolfsburg. Two sides who are in pretty bad form, both of them. They clashed against each other. They were right behind each other on the table. Direct competition, basically, and both couldn't get the victory in this one, and they remain in their positions. Borussia Mönchengladbach actually went behind inside half an hour after Wolfsburg scored twice, but they managed to make it 2-1 by half-time thanks to Thuram, and they scored thanks to Berlin Bolo, the equaliser, of course, to stay neck and neck on the table, 12th and 13th. Wolfsburg 12th with 28 points, and Gladbach with 27 points at 13th. The standings in the Bundesliga, no surprise. Bayern at the top of 58 points, 8 ahead of Dortmund at 50, 44 for Leverkusen, 40, as we mentioned, for Leipzig, Freiburg and Hoffenheim, 37 for Union Berlin, 36 for Köln, 34 for Mainz, 31 for Frankfurt, 29 points for Bochum, 28 for Wolfsburg and 27 for Mönchengladbach, 25 for Bielefeld, 23 for Augsburg, 23 for Hertha Berlin, and it is 19 for Stuttgart and Greuther Fürth 14 with, at the bottom of the Bundesliga table. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version, subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates, follow us on social media, and listen on every podcast listening platform, Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other platform. And until the next episode on Thursday, hopefully, I was with HAD with PSP. Take care and goodbye.
Behind closed doors, I'm a fool for your love.